Okay, everybody, I think we can get started here. First of all, I guess I want to say that this is the last in-person seminar that I will be attending as our seminar organizing committee. It's been a really fun job. If any other faculty want to jump on it, we already have 2 people lined up for next fall, so that's always a good start. Coming up for the rest of the semester, tomorrow, of course, we have the Larson Almaris lecture. Hopefully everybody's aware of Matt Helmer's presentation tomorrow afternoon. We have one more regular seminar on April 29, which is just on Zoom, or we have a speaker from Manitoba talking about wind erosion, which anybody who's driven around the state in the last couple of weeks has definitely seen some evidence of in the ditches and on the snow and everything. So relevant topic, I think, for everybody. And then May 6th, we have our Eat Night. Anything else in department events I'm missing? No?
We'll have more, we'll have some interviews.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have interviews in those first couple weeks of May for our soil physics position and our new climatologist position. Okay, so the seminar at hand today. Thank you for coming over from the next building over. Did you come from Minneapolis campus?
Just next door.
Just
In
next
fact,
door.
I stopped at our departmental seminar on my way here. Got the first 15 minutes of that. So
Okay, great. Oh, this is Dr. Jacques Finlay. He's coming from next door in ecology, evolution, and behavior. He got a PhD at Berkeley, and his lab mostly looks at freshwater ecosystems, but he's going to talk to us about this really cool project based in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So thank you for coming over.
thanks, Anna. Thanks for having me today. Excited to talk to you and see some familiar faces. And, as always, don't get to see people as much as you'd like. So this is a good opportunity to share some information with you. And my goal today is to give you a kind of a broad introduction into the LTER site that is here in the Twin Cities, that relatively new, and then spend some time talking about some of the aquatic work that we're doing in a more detailed way, but hopefully giving you enough of a kind of an overall sense of the project that you can follow up. There's work on forests and pollinators that I'm not going to talk about very much, but I think could be of interest to you all. And yeah, so a lot to say about this new LTER site. How many of you are familiar with LTERs as an entity out there? Well, most of you are familiar with it to some degree, which is good. Kind of a different area of NSF. I'm going to start out with just kind of a big scale version, look at our goals, which are focused on understanding the relationship between urban nature and people, to understand the social ecological system and how it responds to environmental change and social change. And all of what I'm going to talk about today is the current LTER, such as it was funded by NSF. We're writing right at this moment almost the renewal proposal, which has kind of come up really quickly. So we can talk more about that in terms of what a renewal proposal to NSF looks like that is focused on social dynamics. So things are going to be a little different in the renewal proposal, especially with respect to the second point here on informing approaches for addressing inequalities and improving environmental outcomes for all residents. So
I might just try to hide this real quick.
oh yeah, I wasn't sure how to do that, so
I haven't seen it on this sidebar. Usually it's above.
the hide video panel. I can give it a shot.
Oh, it came up on there. Oh,
Yeah, click. Go back to where you hover over the pictures again. You were almost there.
oh, yeah, your cursor's on off to the right. So
Yeah, put the cursor on your own picture again. Yeah, and then go to the boxes. The one is in blue. Make it the one.
Little dash, the teeny tiny.
Yes.
And you should be able to drag it to somewhere, so. Teamwork.
All right. So
Takes a village.
it's a village. Awesome. All right, so just a quick introduction to the group. So we're a big group. We span multiple institutions, most based in the University of Minnesota. Here's a picture touring a floodplain research site, which I'll mention briefly a little bit later on. And here is our fearless leader pointing out a potential study site for us in Minneapolis. Sarah Hobby is the lead PI. So we are a big group, so 30 senior personnel, a lot of graduate students, undergrads and staff, and many, many partners in the metro area. So they're really diverse group of folks, and then just a mind-boggling array of people that we work with or try to work with and try to be good partners to, ranging from folks like different parts of the Met Council, all the way down to watershed districts, individual cities, or nonprofits in some cases. Based at the University of Minnesota, but also Forest Service, Leslie Brandt, and two PIs, co-PIs from the University of St. Thomas, Adam Kay and Chip Small. And we cover a lot of ground in terms of ranging from ecology, entomology, environmental engineering, all the way up to social science, sociology, and public policy. And we're part of the LTR network, which I think most of you are familiar with. And here's a map of the LTER sites in this special part of the NSF, which is kind of not sure where it's going to live in the new version of NSF, but that's a story for maybe later. So we're one of 27 sites on this 6-year funding cycle, about $1 million per year. Funded in 2021, and we're one of 2 active urban research sites. So NSF has wanted to expand LTER sites in the urban environment, and hopefully that will still be the case going forward. But there are not many urban sites yet. And what you might typically think of when thinking about LTER are sites that look more like this. Hubbard Brook, near where I grew up, and in fact, established in 1988 as an LTER site, and that was the summer that I spent the summer there as an REU. On crutches for part of the time. I sprained my ankle playing summer soccer, but had a great time. And LTER sites are really special, right? They have a continuity, long history, and mostly focused on natural systems, although that is changing over time to include agricultural systems as well as urban systems. Well, why urban LTERs? Why the metro in particular as a site? We have, like all cities, persistent environmental problems, as well as a long legacy of racial and socioeconomic disparities, including access and benefit from urban nature. We have some unusual things in the Twin Cities, right? We have abundant long-term data sets. We have an aquatic city in some regards. So we've got lots of aquatic habitats, replicated systems across the city, lakes, streams, thousands of ponds, and many watersheds and smaller scale habitat patches. We've got diversity of governance as well. So over 100 cities, 7 counties, 33 watershed management organizations. So this is a sort of a good opportunity to look at cross-site differences in governance. And we've got a lot happening in terms of social change as well as biophysical change in the Twin Cities. Our conceptual model for this stretch of the LTER is motivated by the attempt to link biophysical habitat biology, ranging from organisms up to habitat patches, drainage networks, and up to whole urban landscapes. and connect that to the social science system of government policy and practice, and connect that to benefits and burdens of urban nature. So the contextualizing factors that are sort of influencing the system are biophysical ones, glacial history, species invasion, warming, all of those things that matter to natural ecosystems are altered in some degrees and maybe magnified in many ways in urban areas. Social factors, so governance, demography, immigration, land use change, all of those social changes, and then technical changes coming representing the built infrastructure and how that is affecting and affected by the human social system. So here we're thinking about the storm drain system, the sanitary sewer system, roads, and other aspects of the built environment. And we're trying in our sort of focal areas, we're trying to connect the dots in terms of all of this complexity in urban systems, starting at a subset of a few focal points. Obviously, there's a lot going on in urban environments, and we are just sort of scratching the surface in terms of trying to do work to connect the dots here. So I'll just introduce you quickly to the four areas of the LTER, the four components. The first one, question one, relates to terrestrial ecosystems, thinking in each one of the natural systems, how urbanization, climate, and management are coming together to affect terrestrial systems, focusing on forests, pollinator systems, and the role of contaminants affecting both forests and pollinator systems. So we're interested in how biodiversity of urban nature or some subsets of that are influencing long-term changes in structure and function in response to stressors focused on contaminants, but also climate change and invasive species and habitat fragmentation. The second focus, so the LTR is split about half natural science and half social science. So the second piece of the natural science group is focused on water and aquatic systems and integrating all of the sort of urban landscape issues related to urbanization, thinking about how they affect watersheds and surface waters. And that's where I'll spend some time digging into some details today. So we're thinking about, again, land use management and water body attributes. So attributes of the hundreds of lakes and streams and ponds that we have in the Twin Cities and how those all interact to mediate or moderate responses to stressors. On the social science, our third question relates to understanding how decisions around urban nature, wealth and investments, and well-being are coupled in space and time to affect social inequalities and outcomes. How government institutions could be changed or could change to better address these things, and leading to improved well-being for urban residents. So here we've got components, a team looking at nature and wealth and the relationship between these two things in terms of things like access and investments, and a team of focused on governance and advocacy. And then the final piece is focused on community engagement and asks the question, how can long-term ecological research engage with diverse urban communities, particularly underrepresented ones, or more equitable and meaningful community outcomes and scientific and community outcomes. So that's a real broad overview of the LTER, diverse and lots of folks involved in doing that. I'm going to narrow down for the rest of today and focus in on watersheds and aquatic systems and sort of point out this huge opportunity that we have to do urban ecology or urban aquatic ecology in this urbanized environment that is also rich in aquatic resources and data sets. So we're trying to understand the interplay and the outcome of urbanization and management, as well as climate change on biogeochemistry and ecology of freshwater surface waters. So three examples. I'll spend most of the time talking about watersheds and urban lakes and really just touching on a few of the examples of ongoing work. A lot of it done with leveraging. So we're working with other funding very often to actually do a lot of the work. But using LTER is a good base to build data sets and collaborations, and then looking for funding to sort of scale up some of this work. So first, I'm going to talk about urban watersheds, and here we're really focused on urban contaminants, including nutrients, and how they are moving through regulated by landscape features, and how we can use this information to reduce impacts of contaminant movement from land to water. Some of the things that we've done in the past and even before the LTR are using nutrient budgets for a small number of urban watersheds, looking at a BMP dynamic. So there are a lot of folks here at the university who are working on this in the stormwater field. So we've brought some of those folks in and have expanded through collaborations to look at this. Focus on street sweeping and stormwater is where I'll go next. And as a starting point for this work, kind of start with one of the first things I did when I started working on urban ecology, which some of you may recognize the neighborhood. I know Jess does. So when I started working on urban watersheds about a decade ago, I was really happy to learn that there was a potential study site right in my neighborhood. So I live close to Hamlin Avenue down here, and we partnered with the Watershed District, Capital Region Watershed District, to kind of enhance their monitoring and do some additional data collections motivated by sort of better understanding of the relationship between tree canopies and water quality. So some pictures here are showing some of the seasonal changes that you see in a residential watershed in St. Paul or Minneapolis. And there's a suggestion here of a lot of seasonal variation, including leaf litter fall. And that was a focal point in terms of a lot of our work, understanding the role that trees and other sources played in influencing stormwater composition and fluxes of nitrogen and phosphorus. And so with a relatively small number of sites and a lot of work, so I think we had 6 sites in our initial study, we sort of identified trees as an important source of variation, contributing somewhere from 40 to 60% of the mass of nitrogen and phosphorus leaving these watersheds was associated with litter fall. So we sort of took that work, sort of conceptualizing trees as pretty good nutrient pumps for moving nutrients from land to water, to thinking about how street sweeping could be better used to address this one stressor, and then working with Minnesota Pollution Control to collect the information to develop a street sweeping credit, which was put into place and is being expanded. So we were, really like doing this work, and it was really gratifying to see the sort of relatively quick changes that could result in policy arising from better understanding of pollution sources. We also realized that there was a lot of other data that was, not being used and was potentially could be brought to understanding urban land-water interactions. And so this gave us a sort of some basis for building up from the 6 watersheds that we worked on initially to trying to scale that up to a larger spatial scale. And we really got more than we had hoped for in terms of the sheer mass of data. The more we looked for information, the more we found. And so this was sort of a gold mine, except it's stormwater, so it's not really a great analogy. But if you like data for something that is really variable and difficult and expensive to collect, it turned out that there was a lot of information available. And so we got some funding from the Stormwater Research Council to expand this effort and put together a database sort of represented here for 91 watersheds. So these are all storm drain watersheds that drain into pipes. So we excluded all of the streams. There's probably more stream data out there. There is more stream data out there. We excluded it so we would just not have to worry about the stream bank dynamics, essentially. So we're looking at piped catchments, 14,000 integrated samples in the database, kind of a large suite of variables. Sediment, phosphorus are the most commonly measured things, but also metals, E. coli, all sorts of other things that I barely even had heard of before I started doing urban work, sort of showing up in this database. We spent a lot of time developing other data sets to be able to interpret this stormwater data. So I know Nick's not here today, but he's been one of the people with this in this group, as well as others who have sort of helped us build up the information to pair with the stormwater observations so we could better interpret it. And showing an example of the distribution of lead in St. Paul. So the map then is showing the hotspots of elevated soil lead in the watershed. And if you live in St. Paul, you can probably sort of pick out where you live and scratch your head about why it might be elevated or not. So with this joined database of stormwater data and supporting data sets for things like slope, other soil properties, tree canopy covers, we could begin to ask some questions of this data in terms of looking at other kind of an expanded set of pollutants. So we hypothesized that we would see some different behaviors of nutrients like phosphorus, which are essential, can be taken up in luxury by organisms, including trees, versus heavy metals, which are playing no biological role, many of them, and are much less biologically active. And so just to kind of summarize what we found, contrasting metals to nutrients and organic matter, and picking on phosphorus here as one example, but similar patterns for other forms of nutrients and organic matter. We can see a couple of some commonalities and some differences for lead versus phosphorus. So for lead, we can see that variation in lead in runoff is primarily related to the mean year of building construction, which is a proxy for soil lead. So we don't have soil lead, as much soil lead for all of the watersheds spread out of the metro that we might want. So we used a proxy for parcel age, which does a pretty good job representing the level of soil contamination. So older buildings have a longer history of lead pollution, and that relates well to soil. And then a second factor is erosion rate. So suspended sediment concentrations also playing a role. So we've got lead contaminated soils and erosion rates, and the combination of where those two things co-occur we see sort of high rates of lead movement from land to water. In contrast, for phosphorus, we see a big difference in terms of canopy cover. Again, kind of going back to our earlier work, trees are pretty effective at sort of moving nutrients out from the terrestrial environment into urban water bodies. But again, we see effects of erosion showing up, indicated by suspended sediment concentrations. So some similarities and some differences between nutrients and heavy metals. Soils and trees accounting for a lot of the variation that we see for metals versus phosphorus. So one thing we're still scratching our head about, and I think you can get a picture of sort of why that might be, is understanding all of the variation that we see in soil erosion, so sediment concentrations. Nothing in our data set really was very satisfactory in terms of explaining the levels of suspended sediments in urban runoff. And I think these pictures hopefully indicate why that might be the case. There's a lot of sediment moving around, and it's associated with a lot of different human activities, some of them intentional, some of them not. And we haven't found a really good way to sort of capture this yet. Things like slope didn't really help us out very much. Age and population density have weak relationships, so higher rates of sediment concentrations in higher, more populated areas. And I think this hints at why that might be the case. So just to kind of sum up and focus on the expansion of the work that we've done here to focus in on lead, we've been able to see that legacy lead, mostly from soil sources, but there's an effect of aircraft potentially, as well as foundries contributing a little bit more variation. But a lot of the variation is coming from distributions of lead, which are really heterogeneous in the environment. But if we can see that variation showing up in stormwater, as I just showed you, also impacting ponds. So older ponds in older neighborhoods having higher levels of lead in the sediment. We can see that showing up in wildlife. Here, this example showing for butterflies from some recent work. So soil patches with elevated lead also have elevated lead levels in organisms. And then finally, the sort of the most disturbing and worrisome thing is that indeed the patterns in soil lead are showing up in patterns of elevated human blood levels as well. So this is Department of Health data showing elevated blood levels in blue in St. Paul, and you can kind of map on the two sections of St. Paul here and see that the areas of elevated soil are the ones where that we have still have a big lead problem for pediatric lead levels. Okay, so I will shift gears to the second part, and that is focused on urban lakes. So we're going to think a little bit about watersheds draining to these lakes and tie that together with a wealth of information about urban water bodies that we've pulled together in the LTER. So on one side of the screen is a map of the delineations of lake sheds, so lake watersheds. We're up to about 177 that we've been able to identify and collect. And so each one of these watersheds then is the total watershed draining into that lake. And then we're combining that with just an astronomical amount of data for our urban lakes in the metro area. So these, the figure is showing the number of lakes monitored per year with trophic indicators like water clarity and nitrogen and phosphorus sort of being the most well monitored. chloride increasingly well monitored in metro lakes, and things like PFAS and cyanotoxins, which isn't shown here, are also slowly increasing as management responds to increased knowledge about different levels of contaminants and stressors in urban water bodies. So Becky Forgrave, shown here, has some recent updates on some of the work that she's been doing. So I put this together just recently, and actually the timing was great because we're working on this renewal proposal. And so this is kind of hot off the press information, and kind of summarizing the effect of urbanization on lakes, and viewed through three stressors: phosphorus, our friend phosphorus; chloride, which is a sort of a quintessential urban stressor; and then PFAS, which is a very urban contaminant. And we have even more of an impact in the Twin Cities because we have a legacy of manufacturing in the East Metro. So what we found so far from this watershed scale analysis is that for phosphorus, at least, things like impervious cover don't seem to make a difference to what we see in terms of water quality and nutrient levels. Lake depth and lake features seem to be playing a much larger role. So the internal processes, the trophic structure, internal loading, and management together are accounting for more of the variation than watershed features. So a lot of these lakes have been loaded up historically by nutrients, and that legacy of those inputs is what we're sort of seeing manifest in lakes. Chloride is helpful because it is responding to current inputs in a predictable way. So more impervious surface, more chloride puts from road salt, and higher chloride levels. Lake hydrology also plays a factor. So lake depth, how much, and watershed size determines how much of that chloride gets flushed out on an annual basis, but I'm not going to talk about that today. The third example here is one that I'm really surprised by, actually. So PFAS, this is in fish, is related to impervious cover. Maybe it shouldn't be a surprise, but so I know until recently, very little about PFAS. So I'm learning a lot, which is fun, also disturbing. But I had predicted that some of the hotspots that we might expect to see from the small number of facilities, airports, plating facilities, might overwhelm and sort of not give us any sort of signal with impervious cover. So I had expected that this would be a scatter shot, but in fact, there does seem to be a relationship between PFAS concentrations and impervious cover. We don't yet, like many things related to PFAS, understand why that is, but hopefully we'll learn more about that. And Minnesota Pollution Control, I think, is doing a good job in terms of moving that forward. So want to look at, so we looked at relationship to sort of overall urbanization drivers, and want to spend a little bit of time talking about urban lakes and how they're changing. So showing you an example for phosphorus, if I showed you an example for chloride, we'd see a trend in the other direction. So just getting that out there. We've got some work ahead of us in terms of managing urban contaminants, but for some things, we seem to be doing a pretty good job in terms of driving down levels of urban nutrient pollution in the metro. So this is an aggregate trend from 70 lakes, sort of looking at the sort of aggregate behavior of the trend in phosphorus over time. So it's a little bit hard to sort of picture what this is looking at, but it's essentially giving us the overall trend in phosphorus in lakes from 1990 on. And if we extended this back, we've got some older time series back to the 80s, we would see an even stronger reduction, I think, with that additional data. So essentially what we're doing is taking all of these time series. So one is from Egan, is represented here. You can see some interesting things going on in it. And we're sort of capturing that and representing it in this GAM plot here. So some good news, we're driving down nutrient pollution. So that's nice to know and encouraging. But it's always more satisfying and more useful to know why that might be. And that question has been one that is pretty challenging to address because there is just so much management going on in our urban metro lakes. So I think the management community has just really developed, over the last few decades and really has sort of built a effective system to take information, apply it, and implement it at a large scale throughout the metro. So all of these things are things that are happening across the metro and are helpful towards addressing nutrient pollution in our streams and lakes. And for now, I'm just going to zero in on one of them, which is a geoengineering approach, a chemical approach to suppressing internal loading in lakes of phosphorus, and that's through the application of alum. So to fully understand the outcome of all of these things is going to require a lot of work and partnerships, and that's important to do. But as a starting point, we've wanted to try to pick together things that were relatively discrete in terms of perturbations in lakes. So we've focused on alum because it provides a sort of a relatively discrete reduction in availability of phosphorus. So many of you are probably familiar with this to some degree. They're taking aluminum salts, adding them at the whole lake basin level, determining the dosing rates from sediment core studies, applying alum sometimes in split doses to the lake. And this is something that works pretty effectively for phosphorus. And I think the metro area is a hot spot for alum application. So the data figure shows the number of alum treatments to lakes per year in the metro. And I projected sort of the end of the decade will be up to, about 100. So this is a substantial number of whole lake alum treatments. Some of them cost, $1 million to do. If it's a big lake, some of them less, but they're expensive propositions, but they're effective for phosphorus reduction. So Katie Pollock, a graduate student that I meant to point out earlier, has done some great work in terms of pulling together a database for all of the alum treatments that we could make sense of, that we had enough information to understand and use the data, the water quality data for them. And she put together data for water quality responses and normalized everything to pre and post alum treatment in lakes. And so what you're looking at are data for 60 or so lakes and the aggregate normalized response before and after. And so some of the things that are shown here are not necessarily surprising, right? Phosphorus, alum is applied to reduce phosphorus, and it does that pretty effectively. We apply phosphorus and it binds up PO4 in the sediments. That has an effect on reducing chlorophyll, increasing water clarity, so makes the lakes nicer looking, at least for some amount of time. But the thing that was not as well known and was somewhat surprising is that we also see a response for nitrogen as well. So alum then specific is applied to bind phosphate. It is not applied to manage nitrogen, and in theory, it shouldn't be interacting with the nitrogen cycle. But of course, this is an opportunity then to expose what we don't know about lake ecosystems and how phosphorus changes in phosphorus affect nitrogen. Nitrogen to phosphorus ratios also change. And the interesting thing is that for phosphorus, after alum is added, we see a slow rebound over different years. So phosphorus starts to creep back up again. Nitrogen stays depressed following alum treatments in the years following. So this had got us thinking about why, how phosphorus might be impacting nitrogen. So, limnologists love to argue about nitrogen and phosphorus. So this is another opportunity to do that and take a look at the contrast between, or the similarities between nitrogen and phosphorus responses. So we came up with some hypotheses for how nitrogen might be impacted due to a phosphorus reduction. One of them might be more denitrification somehow after alum treatment, or less nitrogen fixation. We went out and measured denitrification, didn't really see any suggestion that there was any clear impact on denitrification. Nitrogen fixation, we don't have a lot of information for, but we're sort of leaning away from that and focusing on aquatic plants as mediating this response. And I'll show you some pictures of some additional analysis that we're doing, but I also want to point out that this has been a good opportunity for LTER to do some leverage work to kind of understand what the drivers of some of these management responses are, and also a great opportunity to get students out in the field making measurements, and as is fairly easy to do in the metro area. Okay, so here's why we think this is a aquatic plant-mediated response. It's a picture of Como Lake before alum treatment, and then one picture after alum treatment. It doesn't always look this way, even after alum treatment, as many of you know if you walk around Como Lake, but it has gotten considerably better with alum treatment in 2020. So Katie separated the responses for to alum treatment for shallow and deep lakes. And I think this was sort of one really important piece of the puzzle. When we reduce phosphorus in shallow lakes, we see a much steeper decline in nitrogen concentrations compared to deeper lakes. Shallow lakes have a large littoral zone, so if you make the water clearer, you get a bigger aquatic plant response. And that's kind of what you see here. Clear water can make macrophytes happy, both native and invasive species. So there's another story embedded in that. But what we've taken away from this and a couple of lakes where we had good plant data is that when you make plants happy, particularly rooted submerged macrophytes, then you can, that is the mechanism that drives down nitrogen levels. So aquatic macrophytes can be nitrogen limited. They have access to phosphorus from their roots in the sediment. So there is sort of the evidence has lined up in support of an aquatic plant mechanism. We're working with Jake Walsh, who's a new assistant professor. Many of you may know him, to combine plant data sets and plant management data sets with water quality data sets to further look at this hypothesis. So, one takeaway from this is that alum management is highly effective, not just for phosphorus, but also for nitrogen. So that's a useful information, and it's useful because it's sort of telling us that we can clear up the water, promote macrophyte growth, and that makes our job easier in terms of cleaning up nutrient pollution if we can shift lakes back to a plant-dominated state. It does sort of point out some additional questions that we're trying to get at. And I'll just mention really briefly some of the work that we're doing to relate changes in water quality to human use and perception. So I pulled this great quote from 1924 from the Ramsey County engineer who apparently didn't like aquatic plants very much. And I think it speaks to the complicated relationship that we have between managing for something that we know is going to help us, but may not be always the most popular thing to have around in your particular lakefront property or public beach that you might want to go to and swim in. So part of what we're doing, and this is sort of getting to the social science aspects of the LTR a little bit, is to try to understand how people are benefiting from lakes, cleaner lakes, more so than impaired lakes for sure, but also how it depends or how that is affected by what people are actually doing in lakes. And so as a last thing, I'll just point out this new project led by Bonnie Keeler to help to use sort of chatbot surveys. So when we first started thinking about doing this it was kind of cool, like let's use AI and let's use a chatbot to get information. And just a few years later, I'm like, is this a good idea? But anyway, I think it is a good idea. This is a way to collect information from people as they are interacting with lakes. So much more directly than a survey might be. Complementary to survey-based approaches. This is sort of asking people sort of for their input as they are fishing or swimming or walking around and enjoying a lake. So we've gotten some interesting responses that's beginning to give us insight into what people are keying into as they interact with urban lakes. So I want to end just by kind of looking ahead to the LTER, looking down the road. So we're almost through our first funding cycle, and we are writing this renewal proposal, which I alluded to, and has been ruling our lives lately in more ways than one. And just leave you with a little bit of context in terms of where we're at. So here are all the LTR sites that ever have been. Some of them are still alive and kicking. Some of them ended. They were defunded. And you can see the ones that were sort of one and done out here. So we definitely want to avoid that fate and got some good momentum, hope to continue. But we are needing to sort of revise our overall proposal in the face of diminishment of focus on social science. So again, half the project was social science. Sort of going forward, that is not something that is won't be as well received at NSF in our renewal proposal. So that's where we're at, hoping for renewed funding, working on that proposal, submitting it in just a couple of weeks here to SPA. But no matter what, I think and hope that we will continue, or aspects will continue, no matter what the outcome of that proposal is. We've built some databases, made those available. We have developed relationships and ways of working with some partners that I think are going to be sort of live on beyond the LTER, hopefully. And also set up some experiments. So one experiment in the floodplain of the Minnesota River is a silviculture experiment looking at resilience of tree species to climate change down in the floodplain. So if you want to know more about this, Rebecca Montgomery, Sarah Hobby would be great folks to talk about this experiment. Also, a lot of work that's been done on historical reconstructions of things like racial covenants, lead history, a lot of data that we've been able to bring out and make available. So I feel, no matter what, I feel sort of good about the some of the legacies that have emerged from our work. So I'll just end by acknowledging a zillion partners, funding sources, and some of the folks at these organizations and many others that have helped us get launched. And then point out our website, which is lots of information there, and we have really pushed to get data and papers out and onto the website ahead of our renewal proposal. So thank you, and hopefully there's time for questions.
I have a question to start. I think your graphs show this, but if you have total phosphorus listed there, so what's the balance between like a sediment bound phosphorus and a dissolved phosphorus? Is it all dissolved? And, you know, obviously I'm in the soil, so I don't think about this.
Yeah. So total phosphorus is kind of the limnological standard. The lake sediments release inorganic phosphorus, but what we see is that there is we don't see a lot of inorganic phosphorus. It's usually bound up with organisms or organic matter pretty quickly. Even in stormwater ponds that are anoxic, there's just so much organic matter that most of it's particulate. In the middle of winter, different story. That's when you begin to see that inorganic phosphorus build up.
Then just one more, I'm curious, that was all about lakes. Do you have similar data collection happening in the rivers?
Yeah, great question. We have streams and rivers. Rivers didn't make it into the proposal. Streams really didn't either, but we've gone there anyway with because there's a lot of information to look at. I think it's a big opportunity. Also difficult because there are just so many monitoring stations out there. So we have not put the work in to try to organize it. It's a little overwhelming. So a lake, there's multiple stations. You can find the one that's monitored more often and use that, or combine stations. But for streams, it's really mind-boggling to see the intensity of measurements that have been taken, and you can find them and see them, but it's there waiting for for someone. Lots of information.
Like your data curation, right? Someone needs to data curate the wealth of river information. I have a question about the different types of interventions, because you ended talking a lot about the alum treatment as like a chemical intervention, and then like completely upstream, the stream sweeping and dealing with the nutrients from that level. I've also seen some I was wondering if you've looked at other like midstream, not stream, but like mid interventions. Like I've seen in some places like building more rain gardens or building like catchments in between like a water flow in an actual lake. And I was wondering if you looked at kind of those things, or where you kind of put your money in terms of like the benefit of an intervention. Is it upstream, or is it like putting alum in a lake? Like, where should we put our efforts in terms of remediation?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's all of the above, really. I mean, it's um each of those, I think the aggregate effects of all of that upstream work is having an impact and is necessary for those alum treatments to work. We just have done some modeling to look at that, and but again, there are just a lot of those types of interventions that have been put into place, and they're pretty good records of so you could take a watershed and sort of look at the changes in BMPs over time and begin to make some predictions about the impacts that it's having. The reality is in the urban environment, those, that incremental addition of rain gardens is pretty small. And so it's hard to detect, but is, I think, I think it's doable. We just haven't gone there yet again. But it's a great question. I mean, you can see every year more and more rain gardens going in, more street sweeping happening.
Yeah, that's why I've been curious about it. And I've seen some, and I don't even know if you call them rain gardens, but some large, like rocks, or like, yeah, some large rain garden type catchment places like right before the lake. So
Yeah.
it's made me curious about that newer initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I think the management community here is just going full steam ahead with anything that they can do. Any opportunity of redevelopment is, you've probably all seen this, someone builds a new apartment building, and then for a brief time, you can see in the parking lot, they've dug it up and there's a huge infiltration basin underneath it. And they pave it over and then you never know it's there, but it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Online. Do you think there is much impact from pet density or wildlife density?
Impacts from pet and wildlife density, I think, great question. And I really, the springtime is one that we just see a lot going on. I didn't show a plot, but for stormwater, we see like a snow melt peak and then a spring peak. And some of that is leaf out, but I think, if I had to put money down, I would bet that bird migrations play a role. I don't have any data at all. There's E. coli data in the stormwater data set that I haven't looked at, but one could do that. And then pets, I think, are interesting because they're one, we banned phosphorus fertilizer, but we have a lot of pets around, and it's a big source of new inputs of phosphorus relative to the background. And if Nick was here, he could tell us just how much phosphorus is in the soil in the metro area. I think he has an answer to that. But putting those two things, I think, in context would be really interesting. Like how much phosphorus is coming in from modern sources versus the reservoir in urban soils. There's a lot of phosphorus in our soils. My impression from Nick is that it's high, and it stayed high even though we banned phosphorus fertilizer. But make sure and ask him next time.
I think that's true. That is.
Yeah.
That's stayed high.
Yeah.
Even with the fertilizer, basically a restriction. It's not a total ban, but it's, get a soil test and you need it, you still put it on. But I have a question about alum. When you When you add alum, does it just stay in the lake then, or do you remove it? How does that actually? I mean, I know how that you're precipitating phosphorus, but does it just go to the bottom of the lake there?
Yeah, yeah. I have a picture of the layer. It forms a flock layer that is sort of so measuring denitrification in that was a little interesting because it's this kind of this amorphous layer. Like lake sediment is kind of goopy already, and then the alum kind of makes it fluffy. But it generally settles down and is identifiable for quite some time as a
So
discrete
the
layer.
total phosphorus in the lake probably stays the same with alum, it's just. Stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So it has so when you apply it, it's just strips the water column like it flocculates anything that it comes into contact with. And then as it settles down, it intercepts any PO4 that is migrating up through it.
So that kind of slight increase that you saw after application, is that coming from dissolution of the alum somehow, or is it coming from just new sources of phosphorus going into the lake?
Yeah, I bet it's both. I mean, I think probably eventually you get deposition on top of it. And then I think as you exhaust the binding capacity, but McCarran's Lake was treated in if you're familiar with McCarran's Lake, it's I swim in it. It's in pretty good shape. It was treated 20 years ago and it's still kind of hanging in there. A lot of work gone on upstream to try to intercept the watershed inputs that has been variably effective, but
Does the alum have any other effect on the lake? I mean, aluminum sulfate's acidifying, but I saw you had some other compound in there. So do you plan on adjust it somehow?
it's buffered to try to reduce the pH shock to the system. But one thing that we've started to see is that some watershed districts are starting to add iron as well, and which is
Yeah, that would be. Just, thank you.
we've seen some pretty. I think most of the time when they do it's pretty benign. But Katie Pollock, my graduate student, was out on one lake right after, and they added iron, and they missed the target for pH, and I can't remember if it was really high or really low, but it was
Really low.
Yeah,
heard
I agree
very-
with it.
very
Simple.
They're acidifying too. They're both acidifying.
yeah, yeah. So it was a little bit just Katie and someone else have mentioned it. I mean, it's sort of not exactly the Wild West. Alum has been pretty well studied, but in combination with other things, I think people are taking ideas and pretty quickly trying them out. And I had never heard of this combined treatment before until I saw this watershed district was doing it. So it's hard to keep up actually with what people are trying out. Herbicide use is another thing I didn't talk about, but to treat the invasive plants, it's apparently really easy to get a permit to do that. And so there's a tremendous amount of herbicide use, some aimed at suppression of invasive aquatic plants, some that is not, like someone wants their small lake to look better, and they can get a permit for it. So that's, we're sort of confronted by trying to understand these systems, and that's alum was, because it's relatively well documented, we've kind of focused on that. But some of the other things that are going on in stormwater ponds, especially, we had a bunch of data for ponds in Minneapolis that was shared by the city of Minneapolis, and they spent a lot of money doing studies on stormwater ponds. They never mentioned that those ponds were treated with herbicide, until I had an undergrad who was surveying vegetation. He happened to notice some signs that were out, like caution, this pond is treated with herbicides. And I saw that in the notes and I was like, I wonder if they're adding herbicide to these ponds. So I asked the city, and sure enough, oh yeah, we have a contractor who goes out and sprays around the. Oh, okay. And so those are the sorts of things that really are a little bit of a challenge. In that case, well, a lot of it is going in the lake. But for the Minneapolis ponds, I think they said they were applying it around on the shoreline.
Heard of using copper as a way to reduce algae, is that?
Copper, I mean, it's a little bit mind-boggling in terms of the products that one could buy and the degree to which people are buying those things and getting people to apply them or applying themselves, especially in stormwater ponds, but even in lakes. I mean, a lot of lake associations are actually paying for management, and some of it's really good, I think. But I don't know that that's always the case in terms of what people are doing. The challenges of urban ecology, I guess I sort of chalk it up.
I have a question about your slide where you have the 4 charts with the lead on one side and the phosphorus on the other.
Yeah.
Do you have lead data from around the city? I know. And then you were also looking at the lead within the dissolved solids. Is that right?
In association with as a factor for moving lead out into stormwater. So yeah, we see an effect of high erosion sites have higher concentrations of lead.
Okay. I didn't know if you were comparing different stormwater sites and the age of the neighborhood where you had the stormwater location versus the lead in the total dissolved solids.
Yeah, so the lead in the runoff responds to the age of the average age of the buildings in that watershed. And it also responds to the erosion rates from those watersheds. And so the building age is well related to soil lead concentrations. The erosion rates is not well related to anything. It's I think it's a lot of random things happening at small scales that are building up. But yeah, I think things like gardening and construction are all sort of moving materials. Whether or not they're enriched or not in lead is determined by the soil properties, but we just don't have a good understanding of why erosion is so variable.
Thing to do with like tree cover with erosion. It didn't look like it from your pictures, but because the tree cover or the foliage would like reduce the impact of rainfall.
I think it's complicated because trees can also have negative effects on lawns, right? And Carl, you probably know about I think if you've got a tree
Yeah.
canopy, that's not necessarily great for your lawn. And
Right, unless you're like a really avid like shade lawn going at homeowner.
yeah.
Because you have a lot of bare ground. in some areas.
Yeah.
Right, good conversation, good questions, but we should let Jacques go here in a bit over time. Thank you so much for spending time.
Thank you.
No, not sure.